Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And right off the bat, we are back for another one of Brandon's Drive Home Reviews tours through ancient history.
Picture it. Sicily, 1912.
And what makes you the ancient history expert?
I was there.
So, the Scary Movie franchise has never been what you would call good. You know? You can't say, in all honesty, that this specific franchise led to the downfall of the film parody as a genre, because there had already been several pretty bad outings prior to the first Scary Movie coming out in 2000. You know, ironically, with a lot of them starring Leslie Nielsen, Dracula Dead and Loving It, Wrongfully Accused, Spy Hard. Like, the only good thing about Spy Hard is the Weird Al Yankovic James Bond theme parody at the beginning. That's awesome. But yeah, so the genre was already kinda on its last legs when the Scary Movie franchise started up. And again, I'm not going to blame them for the death of it, but I am going to say that the subsequent sequels to and onward really embodied kind of the worst elements of the parody and the things that would become more and more commonplace in them as the early 2000s kind of stretched on. You know, things like epic movie, disaster movie, Not Another Teen Movie, which I actually do like. I do like Not Another Teen Movie. Superhero movie, another one that I actually do enjoy. But there's no denying these are weaker examples in comparison to the things that came before them, the heyday in the 80s and early 90s. And if you compare those, you compare things like Airplane, Naked Gun, Top Secret, the Hot Shot films, to these movies, and you can really see the difference. What makes a good parody, and we've talked about this multiple times, is A, genuine love for the thing that you are lampooning, and B, a combination of as many different jokes and styles of jokes and humor as you can possibly get. You watch some of those classics and there's sight gags, there's puns, there's verbal humor, you know, and it all just happens one right after the other, after the other, after the other, because if you're not a fan of one type of joke, that's okay, because the next one might be one that you like. So there is a trick to these. But the Scary Movie franchise kind of popularized what I would classify as the more lazy version of the parody. These are ones that were pumped out very quickly, relied primarily on very, what I'm going to call Deadpool humor. You know, a lot of toilet humor, a lot of sex jokes. Didn't really feel like they had any kind of love or affection for whatever it was they were parodying. It felt, as they went on and as these films kind of were really having their last dying gasp, it felt more like either A, it was a ha-ha, remember this thing existed, and that for some reason being a joke, or this thing is stupid and you're stupid for watching it. What you also find in a lot of these, again, in comparison to the originals, is that, you know, again, things like the Gold Standards, the Airplanes, and Naked Guns, the actors are playing everything completely straight. These later ones, it seems like they were painfully aware they were making a movie and were constantly overacting and overselling. So the audience doesn't miss for a second that this is supposed to be a comedy. So, again, I'm not going to say that the Scary Movie franchise led to the death of the parody for a long time, but I am going to say that the sequels embodied so many of the worst traits that would become kind of the hallmark of those last really sad versions right before it kind of fizzled out. It'll be relegated to television for a while before now starting to gradually come back. But what's interesting to me is that the original Scary Movie, the 2000s Scary Movie, was this weird kind of bridge between the classic parodies and what they would become. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the original Scary Movie is, a cinematic classic. I think it's funny, and I think it has its moments, and I had a good time watching it. I still watch it, usually whenever I do a Scream marathon, I'll throw that one in there. But it had its problems. It did a lot of the things that I've mentioned a lot. It relied a lot on gross out humor. It relied a lot on sex jokes and not a lot else. But it did have that little bit of an edge. And what's funny is that, its pedigree is pretty strong. The Wayans brothers were responsible for some of the funniest and yet kind of the most unsung parodies, the ones that you don't really talk about when you're looking back at the great parodies of the past. I'm Gonna Get You, Sucka, or Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood. These are really good parodies. Or even In Living Color, which was kind of a different take on the sketch comedy genre. So it had a good pedigree, and I think, and this is where I'm going to be very careful in my phrasing, so I want to be clear on why I think these were so strong. And I think that is because the Wayans brothers, especially Keenen Ivory Wayans, who was the oldest and kind of the lead on a lot of these early creative projects, had a very clear comedic vision, a very clear comedic target. And that was, he was offering a black perspective on black popular culture. I'm Gonna Get You, Sucka is a parody of blaxploitation films. It is a black actor and director's response to that genre. Same thing with Don't Be a Menace, a black actor and director and, comedy group looking at what was one of the predominant representations of black culture of the time, the hood movies. Even In Living Color, which a lot of people forget, and by today's standards, a lot of it seems very tame, but In Living Color was a black perspective on sketch comedy and raised a lot of those questions. Things like Homie the Clown. Again, today it might not seem very edgy, but for the time it was. And he's not the only character that they did that with. And Scary Movie, the original Scary Movie, had this interesting take in that it was a black audience, a black director, and an actor's response to the resurgence of the teen slasher film, which had regained popularity with Scream, and then had I Know What You Did Last Summer, and so on and so forth. And these were dominating pop culture, but these movies were from a predominantly white perspective. I mean, the original Scream had, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, had no black actors in it. Not a one. And then the second of both kind of threw what I guess you might call the token in there. You know, the second Scream had Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps in the opening, and then Sydney had her best friend, whose name I can't remember, and then of course Brandy was in the second I Know What You Did Last Summer. But they were still predominantly a white take on the material, and when the original Scary Movie was at its best, it's when it was providing a black voice and a black perspective to these predominantly white properties.
Come forward.
Reporting live for Black TV. White folks are dead. We're getting the fuck out of here. Let's roll, Jack. Come on, back to shit. Let's go, motherfucker.
The press only wants to interview the most ignorant person they can find.
I'm on TV. Oh, shit. First cops, now this.
What would have been your last words to Drew?
Run, bitch. Run.
So I provide this long intro and all of this additional information for context, for why I do think the original Scary Movie is actually a decent film. Again, not great. It's definitely at the bottom of the pecking order, in its own genre and even from its own pedigree. But it still had some redeeming qualities and some funny perspectives. Every subsequent sequel, however, got less and less. The second one was a travesty. I think there were 2 funny parts in that I remember laughing at. But I chalked that up to it being rushed. They weren't planning on doing a sequel, and the first one did gangbusters, and then they rushed the second one into production really quick. So I chalked it up to, okay, they didn't have as much time, and, you know, they kind of fell backwards onto their bad habits. And then every subsequent one, after the Wayans brothers were kind of pushed out of their own franchise, I chalked up to just being shit. And being people who weren't funny, not understanding how these were funny. So, again, perspective and context, because when this recent film came out, I can't say I was excited, but I was intrigued, especially to know that the Wayans were kind of back as the creative force, that they had, you know, gotten back control of the franchise that they had been fired from. And also considering that there's been so many changes in the horror genre since the original, and especially with the prevalence of a lot of black horror films. You know, movies like Get Out, Nope, Sinners, now all of these coming from a black director, who wrote the screenplay, black actors. So I was thinking this is going to be really interesting to see what the Wayans brothers' commentary on this new kind of plane of horror is. And I got a little bit, I won't say excited, but I got a little hopeful when I saw an interview with Keenen Ivory Wayans and talking about, you know, wanting to use the legacy cast trope, which has become very popular in modern films, as a means of examining, you know, how far pop culture has come, how far politics, or how we've regressed, you know, race relations and all of this, you know, wanting to use that to kind of comment on these things. And I'm thinking, okay, this has always been his strength, this has always been their strength. So if that's what they're doing, then great. I'm looking forward to this, and this could actually prove to be something really good. And it's just not, folks. It's not good. It is incredibly disappointing. Again, I went in not with high hopes, but I was somewhat hopeful. And I went in and I tried, but I'm sorry. This movie is just, it fails. It fails on every conceivable level. Everything they set out to do, they failed at. There's not a single funny joke in this. There's not a moment in this I remember. There's nothing in this that made me laugh hysterically. I chuckled maybe 3 times, and then the rest it was okay. And I wasn't alone. The theater was pretty full. And I sat there, and again, there wasn't a big roarious laughter at any point in this. There was a, you know, and it just seems like the whole thing just seems tired. And I was kind of hopeful because, as stated, the reason I felt like the Scary Movie sequels didn't do very well is because I thought the second one was rushed. And with this one, I was thinking, okay, they've had some time. They've really fine-tuned it. Everything's going to be fine. No, this feels as lazy and tired as, you know, as if they just thrown it together over the weekend. It really does. It fails at everything it says it's going to do. Like I said, first of all, the comedy. All the jokes fall flat. All of them. I can say I chuckled mildly. And it does seem like a lot of the worst tendencies of the parody are still very much at the forefront of this. Again, as I mentioned, one of the things that you have to do when you're making a good parody is the actors have to take it 100% seriously. And that never happens. These people could not be more aware that they're in a movie. They break the fourth wall consistently. And again, you can do that, but if you're constantly reminding us that we're watching a movie, it doesn't have any power when you do it. So, yeah, nobody in this is trying to act. Nobody in here is trying to play it straight. It's just, yeah. And again, it falls back on a lot of, hey, this movie reference existed.
I understood that reference.
And I'm sorry, just reminding me that Sinners is a thing does not count as it being a joke. You know, not if you're not doing anything funny with it. Furthermore, okay, so that's that. So again, then I thought, okay, you know, one of the things they were saying they were going to do is they're gonna examine popular culture, and they're going to examine current politics, and they're not really. Everything they do is like so on the nose, you know. At one point, having a file flop out that says like the Epstein files, non-redacted. You're like, okay, you know, how does this connect to you know, the substance? That doesn't make a lot of sense. All right. Or they're constantly undercutting the moment by explaining the joke to us. So there is a moment in this where a black guy is waiting at a bus stop, and there's this clearly deranged killer standing next to him. Now, I don't know what movie this is parodying. I'm not sure which one this is, but it's clear it's supposed to be something. And the guy is like almost pure white. He's got a weird deformed hand, you know, and it could not be clearer that this is the bad guy. And the cops pull up, and of course, they jump the black guy and start beating the shit out of him. Okay, there's your commentary. There's a great bit. Here is someone who is obviously the killer, but the cops choose to beat the black guy. You could have just left it there, but no, they have to explain the joke. They have to go into detail on it. They have to have a file that the cop, played by Damon Wayans Jr., flips up and says, guy, very, very white. It's like, okay, we get it. You could have just left it at the first one and not felt the need to explain it. And that's what this movie does with anything that could be even remotely considered social commentary. Even when it does work, it works for maybe a fraction of a second and then they ruin it. And the rest of the time, it just doesn't work at all. And this movie doesn't even fulfill one of its primary promises. On the poster and stuff, it says things like, every line will be crossed. And I was kind of excited about that. You know, one of the things I love watching on YouTube? I love watching reaction videos. I love watching people who have never seen a movie reacting to it for the first time. And I always love it. It never fails. You're watching Airplane or Naked Gun or any of these, and there's always that joke that these younger viewers watching like, oh my God, they'd never get away with that today. They'd be canceled. They'd never do it. And you laugh a little bit because you're like, yeah, we had a bit of a thicker skin back in the day. And so I was remembering the first Scary Movie, and yeah, there's a lot of politically incorrect stuff in there, and you're like, okay, let's shake the tree a little bit. Let's remind them that comedy should be a bit offensive, and comedy should be, something that you go, oh my God. And they do nothing with that. Every line will be crossed. This movie is about as dangerous as one of the heavily suggestive Waylon Smithers episodes of The Simpsons back in the 90s. And admittingly, in the years since the first one, we have been a little bit desensitized because we've had things like Family Guy and South Park kind of redefine what shock comedy is, or what politically incorrect comedy is. But here's the thing, is that even when South Park and Family Guy are being politically incorrect, and yes, they go there and they push those buttons, and a lot of times they're not doing it for any other reason other than wanting to get a reaction out of you. But generally speaking, when they do it, there is a higher purpose at mind. There is a higher point that they're making. Now, you can argue as to whether that's effective or not, or whether it's in good taste or not, but the point stands that when they do it, there's usually a good reason. There is a larger joke or a larger message at play. And here, no, this is like the most challenging things they do is, of course, they have the one character who's supposed to be a parody of the one girl from the most recent Scream movies who, is protesting everything, is always demanding proper pronouns and all that. So they have her, and that's kind of it. That's kind of all they do with her. That's her whole character. There's nothing deeper with that. They bring back Special Officer Doofy in this, who, if you didn't see the first one, that was supposed to be a comment on how dumb they made David Arquette's character in Scream, and they pushed this to the extreme by making him a gentleman with special needs. A joke not in great taste. But again, it did kind of have, I'm not going to defend the joke, but I am going to say that in that context, it had a larger point. And they bring back Special Officer Doofy, and yeah, they do nothing really. Yeah, it was, Timmy was more shocking in his debut in South Park. Timmy and Jimmy have done more controversial things than Doofy does here. He's brought back again because it's a legacy film now, and now it's like, oh, here we are, and here's this guy. So they don't even fulfill the promise of, challenging all of your politically correct views. Yeah, they fall flat on everything. And And it just leaves you feeling just completely drained. I was disappointed at this. I was completely bored by it, considering that Masters of the Universe was not a perfect movie, but I never felt its runtime. You know, there was always something interesting going on. There was always, even with stuff that I didn't feel worked, I thought there was a reason for it to be there. This movie is considerably shorter. That movie was almost 2 hours, or almost 3, I think. This one was an hour and a half, and a little bit more, and I was just like, please end. Yeah. And what's sad is that they threw away, at the end, I'm not going to put up a spoiler warning, because I don't give a shit about this one, and this is a parody, so it's not like there's a real spoiler. When they reveal, quote-unquote, who the killer is, they kind of do like the first one did and made commentary on how the Wayans brothers got forced out of their own franchise and, you know, the bullshit that kind of went on there. It's like, okay, you could do that. You could use that as the core of this movie. Wouldn't it have been great if, like, the killers were, like, all of the Wayans? Like, and they even say, you know how many Wayans there are? There's 1 million of us. And it would have been great if, like, all the killers were all of the Wayans. You got everybody who, you know, their brothers, their sisters, their nieces, nephews, sons, daughters, got them all. And it's like, yeah, we're the Wayans and we're taking back our franchise. That would have been funny, and that would have given them something to kind of drive towards, an underlying theme to, like, hang all the rest of the jokes on and decide these are the jokes we're going to use. But they don't have that. And I think that is exactly what's missing. There's nothing connecting all of these quote-unquote jokes. And again, when these things work, it's because there's a story. And the jokes come in when they fit into that narrative, thin though those narratives may be. And yeah, I feel like they had something and they totally just, again, they kind of cheaped out and decided we're going to go the easy route. And yeah, it's disappointing. I can't think of anything really redeeming about this. Again, there were 1 or 2 minor jokes. The K-pop Demon Hunter reference was kind of funny. I will say, okay, yeah, there was one time I laughed, and it was at a background gag at the very beginning when the 2 characters are talking in front of an amusement park called, you know, the amusement park where everybody dies, clearly being a reference to things like the Final Destination franchise. And the characters are talking in the background, all these rides are breaking, and the roller coaster, people are flying off the roller coaster. You know, that was kind of funny, but that was one thing, and then it just, yeah, it just petered out and died. And so yeah, I don't know how many people were looking forward to this. Again, I was kind of shocked by how many folks were in the theater, but I'm here to tell you folks, don't waste your time. Please don't. And what I'm really worried about is that, as I've said, the parody has slowly been dragging itself back up. And there's more to come. I'm really looking forward to the movie Stop That Train. The trailers for that look really funny. So the parody has been trying to work its way back. And then here comes this movie just reinforcing all the reasons it went away in the first place. And I'm almost scared that it could lead to the genre dying again before it even gets off the ground. And maybe that's an extreme view, but I don't know, because again, there were people in the audience, so if it does well, they'll probably do another one, and it'll probably be just as lazy. And it's that's what I worry about. That's what really makes me sad about this, is that the genre has been trying very hard to rehabilitate itself, and it feels like it just got knocked right back down. So I don't know. We'll have to see what comes. But anyway, that's my take on this. So let's wrap this up, because I've already droned on way longer than I need to about this movie. So final grade for the 2026 version of Scary Movie, it's an F. It's terrible. Don't waste your time. Go see something else, please. So, okay. So yeah, that's a downer. But there it is. Yeah, you never thought you'd feel this depressed after coming out of a comedy, but there you are. So, all right. So there you have it. So thanks for coming along. Thanks for listening. Hope everyone's having a great summer. We'll talk to you later. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.